Hello and welcome to Lupus LA's Your Story, Our Fight podcast. We are here with another incredible guest today. First, I want to thank our sponsors at Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals and our good friends at Gemini Beauty. Thank you for supporting this podcast and being a part of the Lupus LA family. And let me introduce you, the audience, to Jordana Manzano. Jordana is... we're going to go through the array of things that you used to do, that you do now, and that your plans for the future. But you are one of the people that has really changed your whole lupus. Sort of really changed your whole trajectory. But I think you have an incredible story, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So first off, I should tell everybody you have 3 kids, and I know that factors into your story because you have 3 kids in less than 3 years, which I think lupus or no lupus is an incredible feat. And so how did that sort of play in? Give me sort of the Jordana before the kids and where you were and what you were doing, because I think that's a really fascinating part of the story.
I started off as a manager. That's who I am. I'm an organizer, manager kind of person. Not the boss kind of person, but the person who gets things done and surrounds myself with people who are smarter and better than me and helps them create their visions. So I was a restaurant manager and event planner. I would work 17-hour days, minimum 6 days a week. And then I was working for a catering company, which was not for me. I realized it wasn't as much hands-on and 17-hour days, 6 days a week kind of thing. And I quit, got married, and got pregnant very quickly. And had 2 kids in like less than 2 years. And during my second pregnancy, started to feel bad. By the end of my pregnancy, I was on a crutch. I had lost hearing. And the doctor said, we can't really do anything until you're not pregnant. My husband and I both decided we kind of wanted 3 kids. And I was like, you know what, in for penny, in for pound, let's just have our third. And I kind of knew in the back of my head that with the way my health was turning out, like once I got diagnosed, it probably wasn't going to be something we were going to go for. So we just went for the third, and ended up with 3 kids in 3 years. It was the first one slept. I should say that. As most parents know, like the kid's sleeping. So he was going to sleep at 7 o'clock at night and sleeping until 7 or 8 in the morning. And my husband and I were looking at each other going, why the hell not? My second was not like that, but I learned. Yeah.
In between 2 and 3, you didn't really seek out a diagnosis or anything of that nature. So through all the pregnancies, you really didn't have an actual lupus diagnosis. No.
When I was pregnant, and this is true of everybody who's pregnant, all of your labs and everything else can be off. They can be not what it is true. And they said, wait until you are 6 months post-pregnancy, and then get everything checked out. And I got pregnant 10 months post-pregnancy of my, for my third kid. So before my oldest turned 3, I had 3 kids. So it was kind of like, I'm going to keep going and get it done. And then 6 months after she was my third child, my daughter was born, I went to my doctor and went to figure out what was going on.
And were you getting progressively worse during the end of pregnancy 2, in between, and then pregnancy 3?
I didn't get worse. My hearing never recovered. Once I wasn't pregnant, I managed not to be on a crutch anymore. But I didn't get 100% better. And what I wrote off, a lot of it, as I think a lot of women do and a lot of people do, is, look, I had 3 kids, 2 boys to start, and they were not small kids. And I live in Manhattan, and I was walking 15 to 20,000 steps a day, just taking my kids out and about. So I was like, of course my hips hurt, and of course my hands hurt. I'm lifting a 60-pound kid or a 30-pound kid, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. So of course, like, things are going to hurt, and you're going to get tired, and you're doing this. Like when I was in the restaurant business, you're a parent, it's 24 hours a day, And so a lot of it, I sort of wrote off to being a parent.
Was there sort of in the back of your mind, did you think, okay, there's an underlying condition that I know I need to figure out what it is? Or was it really, you just really attributed it to all the pregnancy and the kids and all of that?
I will say I had the opposite story of everybody I know who has some kind of, or the basics of what everybody who has a lupus diagnosis goes through. I didn't really think about it except as being a mom and going, being as physically active as I was. And after 6 months of post-pregnancy, I knew it was time to go and get a checkup and see, what I could do. And I still, it was a doctor who I usually had to wait 2 hours for, and, all those kinds of things that everybody tells, and could be a little pretentious sometimes. And to his credit, after he did the basic exam, he sat down and he talked to me, and I described what I was going through, getting up in the morning and being sort of very stiff and hard to move, got better during the day, then got worse as the day went on. My hearing loss, other things. He goes, I want to run one more test. And so I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis almost immediately. It was 6 months to try and get an appointment for a rheumatologist and all of that kind of stuff. But, and I had to call in a favor of a friend who knew somebody who could get me in to see my doctor, who I still have today. But I will say, unlike most people, I got diagnosed like that before I even thought there was more going on.
Mm-hmm. And when did the RA turn into a lupus diagnosis?
Unfortunately, for years, I just kept getting worse. So it morphed into psoriatic arthritis, then it morphed into more things, and they weren't sure what was going on. And one of the reasons I love my doctor is that she sends me for second opinions. And she had me see this top specialist in New York for rheumatology. And that was when the diagnosis of lupus was added into the regular diagnosis. And my bloods would come back mixed. Sometimes I would test for lupus, sometimes I wouldn't. Now I consistently test for lupus. But I will say I've had a lot of luck with doctors believing me and supporting the diagnosis versus doubting, which is what I think a lot of people go through.
Mm-hmm. And how did you mentally, how did it change your approach when you were diagnosed with RA versus the lupus diagnosis? Did it really alter anything in terms of your mental approach?
I will say when I first got my lupus diagnosis, I was kind of like, what does this mean? Like, what, we all Google things, and the first thing that comes up with lupus is you're going to end up in a wheelchair and then die, right?
Right.
And the truth of the matter is I have sort of a laissez-faire about the whole thing. I find that I am the person who gets the 5% of whatever it is. So in other words, I no longer think I'm terminal. I'm going to be chronic. I'm going to be the one outlier who gets the one symptom that nobody else believes, or has the reaction that most lupus patients don't get, or other things, as well as all the regular stuff. But, and so I have lots of.
So give me an example of that. Yeah, give me an example of that 5% where that's happened.
That this is something that drives me nuts. Because autoimmune diseases and lupus hits people differently. Everybody is unique. And for years, I would go to specialists and doctors who would tell me to go gluten-free. And I was like, I don't want to go gluten-free. So I finally had one test where it said I had a celiac marker. So it really would be good if I went gluten-free. And which I'm happy to talk about later, have gone through so many different kinds of both Eastern, Western, and alternative medicines. And so I went hardcore gluten-free for 7 months. I mean, everything. If I went out to dinner, I made sure they didn't dust that piece of chicken in flour. And I got worse. I got sicker and sicker and worse, and my stomach hurt more, and it was awful. And I was like, basically, I can't curse on this podcast, but I was like, no, I'm done. Right? Like, I'm done. This is not working for me.
Right.
And I ignored what everybody said. And I went back and started eating right. Now, years later, I went on a program that helped me figure out exactly what my body reacts to. And one of the things that I have a real problem with is white potatoes. And everything that's gluten-free almost has white potato starch in it. So the reason I got worse was because I cannot tolerate white potatoes. And so when I went gluten-free, I went from the thing I could eat, which was gluten, to the thing I can't eat. So most people will tell you, you know, you should be gluten-free or you should have a plant diet. My system can't tolerate fructose or fructans, and my system cannot tolerate white potato starch. So the only thing I can eat, or a lot of what I eat, is gluten and animal proteins. And so I am.
Me too. Isn't it great?
Yeah, it's awesome. So
I have also been on the receiving end of gluten-free, change your diet, all of that. I haven't done the experiment. I may just co-op your story because it'll make my life easier. But I do. I think that's really important because I do think, and Lupus LA talks to a lot of experts across the spectrum of Eastern and Western medicine. And I do think the personalized approach to your particular illness or your particular set of reactions to your illness is super important. And I think that really needs to be talked about more because I don't think there's a one size fits all for everybody in terms of diet or exercise or, acupuncture versus Reiki versus, nothing. So I applaud you for really taking control of that part of your treatment.
I think that's the one thing that, like, if there's one piece of advice that I'd be adamant in telling people who have lupus, it would be that don't trust anybody who says this is what's good for everyone. In other words, like, I think, and there are medical studies that are done on this, I believe, that it's all very individualized how your body's going to react to things and what your triggers can be. So I know people who love to be in the sun and that it says it helps them. And then there's like me, I cannot be in the sun. I know a huge amount of, people with lupus who cannot be anywhere near light, fluorescent light, outside light, anything. And so I think, there is no understanding that there is no one size fits all for lupus patients is one of the biggest things you can do, and to trust yourself and to know that if you're feeling worse, you're feeling worse, and that whatever it is not working, and you don't have to keep trying. Like, you don't have to keep doing whatever they tell you have to do, that instead you can try something else.
I love that advice. And so we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to come back and talk about how you specifically tracked everything, because I know that was a really big part of you finding what worked for you. And then we are going to answer the question that everybody who's been watching so far has been asking is, why is there so much yarn in this room that we're in? And we're going to talk about that too. So we'll be right back.
Lupus LA's fellowship program is an essential part of ensuring the training of future rheumatologists. The nation is experiencing a serious shortage of pediatric rheumatologists. Today, there are approximately 300,000 children diagnosed with rheumatic conditions in the United States, but only about 250 practicing pediatric rheumatologists to meet this tremendous need. Call 310-657-5667 or visit our website at lupusla.org to support the efforts of Lupus LA.
We are back on the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. We're talking to Jordana Manzano, and we were talking a lot before the break about, and before we answer the mystery of the yarn, we're going to talk a little bit more about how specifically you really figured this out about what symptoms triggered you. And I think that's, you really went about it, I would say, just like an event planner in terms of how you approached it. And I think that's a really helpful tool. And I wondered if you could kind of describe how you did that.
I will say the first thing, as I said, was I've tried a lot of things. I've been open to trying a lot of things, and, what worked for me may not work for others, but what didn't work for me may work for others. And I think that's a big piece of it. But what helped me was getting on a program that helped me track all my symptoms. And they knew what symptoms I didn't even realize I had. Like, I had no idea that brain fog was actually a symptom of lupus. I thought it was just me and getting older. And they're like, nope, that's a symptom. You need to track it. And then tracking your food intake, because I think there's a lot of information now out about how your gut reacts and how that affects autoimmune diseases and lupus. So for me, there's lots of programs out there. There are a lot of like, little apps you can just download on your phone and track. I worked with a specific program called MyMe that really worked on helping and coaching and giving me specifics and looking at things and analyzing the data. And I went from sort of living 50% of my life to being able to live 75% of my life, which was a huge I can't work 17 hours a day. If you're a lupus patient, there's almost no way you're working 17 hours a day. So, but I can have a life again. And my mom says she got her daughter back. And so that's been a real sort of game changer, life changer for me.
Great. Yeah, I know Lupus LA, we've been talking to the folks at MyMe, and we're going to put together a program with them to sort of introduce our community to their community, because I think it's, we're in a tricky position whether or not we endorse certain products or not products, but I think the concept that they are working in seems to be really on point. And I think that that's one of our jobs as a lupus organization, is to really advocate for people and teaching people how to advocate for themselves. And you've clearly demonstrated that, and I think that's terrific. So, okay, let's tell everybody, as you came out and sort of had to leave the restaurant business and the event planning business behind, what grew out of that? Tell me kind of how you reinvented yourself, all the while raising 3 kids in Manhattan, which is, in and of itself, more than a full-time job.
Yes. I did have 3 children in less than 3 years, and 2 had ADHD and special needs, and I'm a big believer in early intervention, so it took up a lot of time, and that was my focus. As I became much healthier, part of that led me to the ReelAbilities Film Festival, which is all about people with disabilities, whether it's learning differences, whether it's people with chronic illnesses. There are so many great shorts I love sharing with people about it. But it gave me something to do. I volunteer for them. I'm not paid. And so it just could work on my own time. So as I was feeling better and could do more, I could raise awareness. And these films are mostly free. So it's not even like, I'm raising money. It's like raising awareness and getting people to see what it's like to have a chronic illness, or what it's like to be in a horror film and actually be in a wheelchair. They're just great films, but they also raise awareness and break down barriers and make people understand what's really happening, which is why I love it and got so involved. The film festival is housed or sort of run, its parent organization is the JCC Manhattan. And I had a son who in February of 2020 was obsessed with Rainbow Loom. And I wanted something that was a little more like environmentally friendly and got a little more out of it than just the little Rainbow Loom bracelets and things. And so I convinced him to take.
Tell our audience what Rainbow Loom is.
Oh, Rainbow Loom is those tiny little rubber bands that almost look like they're orthodontist rubber bands. And they're multicolored, and you use what is basically a crochet hook to tangle them together into a bracelet, a necklace, a little animal. It's all plastic, so it's not very environmentally friendly. It is a good kind of thing to do on a plane. If you have small children, go look into it. It is a great thing. Okay. And all ages can do it, and it's easy to, bring with you or do at a restaurant or things like that. But at the time he was, getting older, he was 12, 13. And I was like, let's find something better, right? Let's find something that can be a little more. And so he agreed to take a crochet class with me at the JCC. It was an adult class, but it was something fun. And I said to him, look, you know, it's something to do with your hands. I can't sit at a computer and type. I can't stand for hours on end. And I highly doubt I'll be able to sit in a chair and crochet, but I'll do it with you because you don't want to do it by yourself and it's an adult class. But, you know, I may not even last more than just sitting in the class, but we'll see what happens. And what turned out was that crochet was actually really good for my Raynaud's and for my arthritis. So the last time I went to see my doctor, she's like, your hands are a little swollen. And I was like, I haven't been able to crochet in a month. And she's like, oh. And so it's interesting how something that I thought never would happen, the crochet really helped my arthritis in my hands and my Raynaud's. And then COVID hit. So it's February of 2020. I just learned to crochet. And I had nothing to do but try and, you know, occupy my children at home. So I became more and more engaged with crochet. It was something I could do while my children were talking to me. I, as a side note, had gone to culinary school, learned to be a chef, mainly for the restaurant event side of my, you know, sort of having another skill set, but not to become a chef. But I was known for, I've been baking since I was like 7 or 8. So I was known for the stuff that I bake. But I could no longer bake and give it out or anything else because COVID hit. And when you're home with your kids, there's only so much you can bake. And you can't really talk to your kids while you're baking. So I started crocheting. And it was both meditative, just nice. You know, the big thing with lupus is stress is a trigger. And so it was so everything about crochet was making me feel better. And so I ended up starting sort of a business, and up until recently, all proceeds, it was straight donations to ReelAbilities or the JCC, or if there was another organization that somebody wanted to donate to, it was fine. But it was, and now I'm segueing into a business, but it's called Snugs Sweets by Jay, and it's either crochet or custom order food. Around the holidays, I tend to, you know, put out an email that says, anybody want anything? This is the price and this is the list. It's not an everyday kind of thing. It's just sort of grassroots and local.
And what kinds of things do you bake? What's your number one seller?
My number one seller is either challah or apple cake. I am not a fancy baker. I am not somebody who makes these like gorgeous flour, you know, in detail. It's all comfort food. I am one of those people who wants to take care of everybody and provide comfort. So it's breads and quick breads, as they're called, like banana bread, apple cake, things like that, muffins. And people love them.
I feel like comfort food goes very well with crochet. It all just feels very warm and comfortable and friendly. And what kinds of things do you crochet? What's your most popular crochet item?
My most popular crochet item, I would say, is what's called a lovey. It's it's half stuffed animal, half blanket. So it's those things you see where the blanket's probably about 12 inches square and it has a little head and some arms. And they're just little fun, cute things that, one, they're easy to make for me, but also people really love them as baby gifts. I've also done a lot of college grad where I make a mascot for somebody who got into college or something like that.
Got it. We have a few loveys around our house at the moment, I will tell you that. So I think overall, what I love about your message is that you really keep reinventing yourself. And whether that's because of lupus or because of another aspect of your life, you've been able to tie it in to your lupus and to your treatment and to your care. And I find that to be really inspirational. And I wonder if you could talk about just kind of how that, what inside you, because I think, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I'm trying to say that, a lot of people can go the other way, when these things happen. And so how have you really worked to turn these things into a positive aspect of your approach to lupus and your treatment of your lupus?
I think, it's one of these things I didn't tell you about in my pre-interview, but if you've Googled me, you'd find it out. I lost my dad in 9/11. And one of the things I've learned is life is incredibly short. And you have to decide whether you're going to let the bad stuff get you down or whether you're going to try and make things work. And by that, I don't mean that everything's going to be perfect or that you have to do everything every day, right? I have to take a nap for 2 hours every day or I get a migraine. I mean, it's not like, people say, oh, you're taking your nap. I'm like, yeah, so I can get through the day. Like a lot of people with lupus have those issues, right? And people don't quite understand them. But with that, I don't want to give in. I want to keep trying and keep finding a way to engage myself and be a part of the world around me. Whether it's sharing hugs during COVID through crochet and food, whether it's showing up for my kids, whether it's making sure that ReelAbilities films are being shown. I think it's hard, but the biggest piece is remembering it's okay to take it day by day and piece by piece, and that you don't have to do everything big. I didn't start saying, oh, I'm going to start a crochet business, right? I started because people said, oh, I love your crochet. And I was like, you know what? We're trying to raise money for ReelAbilities right now. Why not tell them instead of giving me $35, they can give it to ReelAbilities, right? They want to pay me for whatever I'm making. Why not see if we can't leverage something out of this? And I'll do what I can. And, I think it's hard to say like exactly what it is. I think it's not giving up or giving in, but part of that is cutting yourself slack. And knowing that, it's okay that you feel like whatever you feel and you need to take a 2-hour nap or not go to yoga class or, whatever it is that you need to get through the day.
I think that's, very well said. And tell me, our last question, I want to know how your kids have played a role as they've grown up, because obviously their whole life, any memories go back to when you had lupus or after your diagnosis. What's their sort of approach to your illness?
I think it's hard. They have to see me chronically ill, right? But at the same time, I hope what I'm also showing them is strength, right? Like, if I get on an airplane and do something, I may not be able to walk off that airplane, but it doesn't stop me from going. And if they have to be my crutch, it's showing them it's okay to ask for help, right? Like, that it's okay to say, okay, kids, you're my crutches now until I can walk again, And I think my kids are incredibly amazing, but that's my job as their mother, right? But It's hard. They deal with it that sometimes I just, collapse and sleep for 24 hours. But they also know that I'm there and they can knock on the door. And if I don't roll over, I don't roll over. But if I do, I'm happy to talk to them while they sit on the edge of my bed. And, it's, you can't let things stop you. And they've learned that, that you just have to keep going and make do. And that sometimes you have to ask for help. Sometimes you have to push through when you don't feel well. And sometimes you have to say no. But doing all that, you still have to live your life and try your best. Absolutely. Amen to that. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of the Lupus LA family. I think this is going to inspire a lot of people, and I hope it does. And I hope people really listen to your words and think about how they
internalize that with their own lupus and their own diagnosis. So thank you so much for sharing and joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.